In the case against Brian Koberger, one of the most breathtaking details about the crime is that it happened in about 13 to 20 minutes. Two surviving roommates were left, and the majority of their story exists only in rumors at this point. Every official statement that we've heard from the survivors has been extremely vague, and this is likely due to the case being gagged, sealed, and redacted. But for those following this case, it is extremely frustrating to not have reassurance that the stories from these survivors were fully investigated. And this frustration and confusion is fueled by the defense, who has left statements saying things such as the first floor roommate has information that is exculpatory and material to Brian Kohlberger. And even in other statements, we've heard that the victims were alive and upright, running up and down the stairs. We have only seen snapshots of what is a 300-plus page document and multiple affidavits. So in this video, with updated information and using only official sources, we're going to try to answer the question as best we can. What happened on the second floor? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Swamp Rose, and today I'm continuing my podcast where I cover the Idaho4 case, otherwise known as the case against Brian Koberger. So with all of that said, I'm going to pull up the PCA, and in words, I'm going to walk you through the crime from 4 a.m. to 4:20 a.m. with this new updated information that we recently heard. So let me go ahead and get the PCA. Okay, so if you happen to want to look up this information on your own, you go to the Idaho Judicial Cases of Interest, and this is the very first document. It says affidavit on it. I'm going to skip to page 4. Okay, so on page 4, when we start, this is where the crime begins to be described. The first sentence says, DM stated she originally went to sleep in her room on the southeast side of the second floor. What I'm focusing on right now is this word originally. So I've always wondered what time Dylan woke up. Obviously, the call went through at like 11:56 to 911, but there were people there before then, and we don't know exactly what the chain of events were. So just for the point of this analysis, let's say Dylan was in her, go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like if you're in your bedroom before 4 a.m. and you're sleeping until close to noon, at some point you might want to leave your room to like get a glass of water, wash your face, use the bathroom. And I've always wondered, if Dylan was in her room, how could she leave the room to go to the kitchen or the restroom and not see the crime scene? But I think when we look at the PCA, let me go ahead and put this on full screen. But when we look at the PCA and we say it's the word originally, doesn't that quite make it sound like she ended up somewhere else? So she originally was on the southeast side of the house on the second floor. That would tell us that she's not on the southeast side of the second floor. So I'm assuming when I look at the second set of blueprints that shows the bottom floor, it would be more likely she ended up in Bethany's room, especially if Bethany was the only one answering her, because they have forensic activity on the phones at this time. It would make sense if she ran downstairs. And if that were the case, then she could possibly stay in that room, or she could possibly stay downstairs and avoid the crime scene until noon. All right, let's keep going with this. DM stated she awoke at approximately 4 a.m. But what she stated sounded like Gonzalez playing with her dog in one of the upstairs rooms, which were located on the third floor. Okay, guys. She was awoke. So the operative word is awoke. That means she was sleeping before 4 a.m. So we're not talking about 8 hours. We're talking about more than 8 hours. Again, solidifying my thoughts that she was on a different level of the house away from the crime scene during those 8 hours. So at approximately 4 a.m., by what she stated, sounded like Gonzalez playing with her dog.
This is a party house. Why didn't she say roughhousing upstairs? Why didn't she say dancing? Because they do TikTok dances and everything. Why did she say playing with the dog? I would say likely because the dog was making dog noises. And as I've said before, I feel like Murphy was freaking out because something happened to Maddie. A short time later, DM said she heard what she thought was Gonzalez say something to the effect of "There's someone here." Now, this is where you really have to pay attention. Let me even switch colors on this. It says a review of records obtained from forensic download of Kernodle's phone showed that this could also have been Kernodle on her cellular phone, indicated she was awakened using TikTok at approximately 4:12 a.m. So a couple points to make. Number one, if Xana was using TikTok at 4:12, that means the dog activity likely was going on, it looks like, for about 10 minutes. You got 4:12 here, you got 4 a.m. was when the noise started. So it sounds like the extreme offender had noise loud enough to be heard on the second floor for a good 10 minutes. That likely means Kernodle and Chapin heard it too. There is something to be said that people on the second floor were not the target. DM's door was the closest to the sliding glass door. It also was the closest to the stairwell. So if this was a random attack, DM's door was the first one met. She wasn't the target. That's why I do think it was someone upstairs. And if the dog was barking, it would indicate maybe it wasn't Kaylee at first. Now, here's the thing that really needs to be paid attention to. I'm actually going to grab another color here. Actually, let me erase all this. I want you guys to really pay attention to this. Okay. DM said she thought she heard Gonzalez say something to the effect of "There's someone here." A review obtained of the forensic download of Kernodle's phone showed that this could have been Kernodle, as her cellular phone was awake and she was using TikTok at 4 a.m. In this sentence, don't you feel like LE is somewhat contradicting DM? DM is saying Gonzalez said there's something to the effect of "There's someone here." A review of records obtained showed that it could have been Kernodle. Well, I want to remind you of something that we heard in the hearings recently. It was said that DM thought she heard one of the victims running up and down the stairs, or thought she saw one. Okay? And then they went on to say that was impossible because that victim was deceased in her bed and never left it. That kind of makes me think it could be Maddie. But we also know that Kaylee was also found in the bed. And if they had fallen asleep together, she could have never left it. I'm curious why the police are willing to go out on a limb and say, "Oh no, she was talking about Kernodle, not Gonzalez, not Gonzalez, right?" Why wouldn't they go out on a limb and say she saw Xana running up and down the stairs and not Kaylee or Maddie? In Xana's room is another reason why I think it's possible that DM saw Xana running up and down the stairs. Is the police clearly state in Blakert's PCA that they found Xana on the floor. So she wasn't found in her bed, so Ann Taylor couldn't have been referencing that. The other thing is there was a handprint found on one of the banisters, the inside banisters. They didn't specify. DM stated she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about somebody being in the house. DM stated she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. DM then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Couple things. So she didn't see anything when she opened her door. That kind of indicates the extreme offender was still upstairs. And then when she heard the comment of somebody being here. So it looks like the extreme offender was upstairs when that happened, and she heard crying from Kernodle's room. Now, I always thought that could mean that Kernodle got injured on the way in, the unaliver's way in. And then he went upstairs, heard her crying, came back to finish the job. Okay, remember, there's a trigger warning for this whole video. However, with this new information of somebody running up and down the stairs, could that have been Xana going to help the girls? And did she get injured and was crying downstairs? And I wonder, when I hear "it's okay, I'm going to help you," was that the extreme offender or was that Ethan? Could that have been Ethan? Let's keep going. At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of the 1122 King Road home, picked up distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimpered, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17. The security camera is less than 50 feet from Kernodle's bedroom. Okay. Let's look at this for a second. 4:17, the camera turned on. And at 4:17, they heard a dog barking numerous times. Okay, well, what did we learn up here? We learned that the dog was barking or making dog noises at 4 a.m. And the dog is still barking at 4:17. So that means that Murphy was freaking out at this point for almost 20 minutes. And think of the level of decibel it would have to be for a security camera about 50 feet away to pick up the distorted audio that sounded like a whimper, a loud thud, and a dog bark from within a house. So we know it has to be as loud as a primal freaking out dog bark. We heard there was a loud thud. Now think about how loud a thud has to be caught up on a security cam nearly 50 feet away from indoors. I do want to propose the option that maybe that thud could have been coming from outside, but we don't know.
And to understand why I'm saying that, I'm going to read this post that was posted by Genjo, who owns the disaster response team that did the cleanup for the crime scene. Genjo goes on to say, "My company did the cleanup for it. I didn't see it personally, but my guys were there. I did read the estimate, though. Here's what I can tell you. Ethan and Santa fought for their fucking lives. That was the largest biohazard job I've ever gotten. My estimator had to go in and do it by hand, room by room. We were not allowed to use our technology. No pictures, no Dogu sketch. He said he didn't sleep for 3 days. All the guys signed NDAs. They were complete pros. P.S. Fuck the media. Vultures. They harassed me and my guys for months. It was awful."
DM stated she opened her door a third time and saw a figure clad in black clothing standing in a mask with a mask over the person's mouth walking towards her. She described the figure as 5'10" or taller male, but not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past DM as she stood in a frozen shock phase, and then the man walked back out the sliding glass door. Okay, a couple quick things. We have another testimony that has been given from the Chapins, allegedly gathered from BF, the other surviving roommate, that morning. And she thought she heard multiple male voices, which sounded like a frat party. At the end of that statement, she did say she was scared. Now, I want to bring up something about DM. I do believe that we're getting two narratives with her. We're getting one saying she was scared, locked her door, closed it. We're getting another narrative saying she thought it was no big deal, frat fight. Same thing with BF. We're being told frat voices spill over from party, but they were scared. And if DM was scared enough to end up in the first floor, it's not that I don't believe their story, it's that it's so obvious there's more to this. And I just wonder what pieces that we're missing. All right, so the male walked towards the sliding back glass door. DM locked herself in the room after seeing the male. A couple questions. We don't know where the perpetrator entered. There have been reports that the store was left wide open that morning at 8:30. What if he exited out the bottom door? We've heard rumors, specifically directly coming from Richard Batanti, private investigator for the defense, in a foreign newspaper stating Bethany heard what she thought was a naked man running by her window. What if the perpetrator did shed his clothes, run out the bottom door, left it open, and that's where DM saw her naked man? But we can't verify that. And now he could have gone out the sliding glass door. That could be indicated by evidence they might have found on the high side of the house. Now, we've heard that they found blood, but while we're talking about blood, let's also talk about evidence marker number 3. They found a boot. They found a boot print. So hold on a second. Let me put my camera back on. You guys, if there's a boot print and then there's a latent van shoe print, that's 2 perpetrators. There is DNA on the knife sheath, then there's DNA on the banister, and then there's a blood DNA on the banister, a handprint, and then there's blood DNA in a glove outside. That's 3 perpetrators. So if we had nothing else to go on and no suspects, I think all of us would be saying this is 2 to 3 people who committed this crime. Anyway, let's get back to the PCA. She locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state she recognized this male. This leads investigators to believe that he left the scene. And this is really important. A combination of DM's statements to law enforcement and reviews of forensic download records from BF and DM's phone, a video of the suspect's video as described below, leads investigators to believe the homicides occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. I want to point out one last thing to you. This. A video of suspect video as described. In open court, Ann Taylor adamantly requested video that she had not obtained yet. She said that it was incredibly important video that she thought the prosecutors really wanted to use for Brian Koberger's case, and she hadn't received it yet. She said it was not a video of Brian's car. Could somebody have taken what they think or is a picture or video of Brian Koberger? The other thing I want to point out is that investigators believe the homicides happened between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. They are banking this on the forensic downloads and the information that the roommates had, and they built their case outward from there, it sounds like. Had they not had the forensic downloads of the phones, I wonder if this timeline would be different. This is important too. I just want to emphasize this. During the process of processing the crime scene, investigators found a latent shoe print, which was located during the second processing of the crime scene with ISP. Let me pull this up. Again, latent shoe print, guys. A Vans diamond print shoe print and a shoe print on the high side of the house. They use this with the amino black test. Diamond shaped pattern outside the door of DM's room. and it was consistent with the suspect's path of travel. So I just want to explore one last concept, which is the target was not on the second floor. I want to make that blanket statement. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm just going to build off of it. Steve Gonzalez said in an interview they didn't have to go upstairs. I think that means that somebody was met on the second floor. But if that's true, why did the perpetrator go up the stairs? The police have said this was a targeted and isolated attack. And for some reason, Dylan was spared. And so when I'm reading about this footprint, it does bring up one last point I want to bring up to my audience, which is if the house was targeted, if the house was targeted and not the individuals, why? Which is why some people might have been spared while others weren't. When I first started studying this case, I read a fascinating article regarding Ted Bundy. And they asked Ted Bundy years later, Ted Bundy was an extreme offender, and he ended up raiding a sorority house. And he unalived many people, but he left many people alive. So years later, people asked him, well, why did you target certain places and not others? And he said, it's very simple. I picked the rooms that were unlocked. So lock your doors. And so this case continues, and it just gets more and more mysterious. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And this was my analysis of what happened on the second floor. And if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening to what I have to say. I would love for you to consider subscribing to my channel. I try to put out content like this daily.